Do you remember your very first best friend? I do. Midnight was giving birth in the closet at the end of the hall. The repeating pattern of deep growls and shrieks woke me. Kittens, I nearly shouted as I crawled down from the top bunk. My sister stirred on the bottom bed. I paused on the ladder, held my breath, hoped she wouldn't open her eyes. After a moment, she rolled onto her side and fell back into deep sleep. I was glad she didn't wake. I wanted the kitties all to myself. Midnight continued to scream. I cracked open my bedroom door and saw my parents kneeling in the hallway, peering into the closet. They noticed I was standing there and told me to get back in bed. But I want to make sure Midnight is okay, I protested. She was mine too. I should have been allowed to check on her. Dad refused to let me come out of the room. He said he would get me when it was over. Mom agreed with him. She said I was too little to watch. Too little? I was 4 years old and knew that babies came from a mommy's belly. Plus, I had been waiting forever to see the kittens. My parents weren't being fair. Please, let me? I begged. I'll be good. Mom commanded me to go back to bed. I crossed my arms and shook my head. Dad threatened to spank me. I stomped my foot and cried, thinking a tantrum would make them understand that I was right and they were wrong. Dad didn't care much for my new approach. He picked me up by the arm and carried me to my bed. He said to keep quiet or else he would take the nightlight and lock me in the dark. It's not fair. I screamed, instantly regretting it. Dad squeezed my arm so tight that I began to cry for real. When he let go, I rubbed the spot, trying to make it look worse than it really was. He told me I was punished, then pulled the nightlight from the wall. No, don't! I cried out. Ignoring my pleads, Dad went back into the hall and slammed my door shut. I heard my sister sobbing from on the lower bed. I felt bad that she had to suffer for my mistake, so I climbed down and cuddled up next to her. I told her I was sorry. She was terrified of the dark, more so than I, but eventually she relaxed and fell back to sleep while holding my hand. I couldn't rest, though. Midnight's persistent shuddering cries and gargling noises kept me from closing my eyes. I stared into the black, waiting. It felt like forever. I'm not sure how it happened, but the next thing I remember is Mom waking my sister and me. Come see, she urged. The sunlight coming through the window lit up her smile. The kittens were tiny versions of Midnight, 8 of them in total. All the same jet black color except for one. He had a speck of white fur above his nose, with white front paws to match. That one was mine. I knew the moment I saw him. Dad said we could give them names. It wasn't an easy task since they all looked the same. After several failed attempts to remember which was which, my sister decided the best thing to do was to call them Kitty Cat, but she was only 2 years old and pronounced it Key Cat. The oddball was the only exception. He was mine to name, so I named him Charlie. Charlie was more playful than the rest of the litter. Whenever my sister and I were allowed to pick them up, he would roll on his back to let us pet his belly. Sometimes he would try to suck on our fingers, mistaking them for a part of his mother. It never failed to make my sister laugh. And sometimes, when Midnight laid down in the box to feed them, he would get turned around, managing to walk away from her. Mom would pick him up, turn him in the right direction and say, "You're going the wrong way, Charlie." Eventually, the kittens opened their eyes. My sister and I were allowed to play with them without supervision, but only if we stayed in the hallway. Dad said we weren't allowed to take them out of the closet because they were still too small to run free. We didn't mind. Sitting on the floor petting them was one of our favorite things to do, especially when Midnight fed them. Charlie was turning out to be the runt. He ate well, but he never latched on to Midnight like the others did. While they loved to pat at her stomach and purr, Charlie was always too busy going the wrong way. No matter how many times we picked him up and faced him in the right direction, sooner or later, he would get turned around again. Time went on, and the kittens got bigger. They meowed whenever someone would walk down the hall, demanding us to stop and play. Sometimes they got up on their hind legs, just barely able to peek over edge of the box. One day, my sister yelled something about the kittens. Mom and I came running from the living room to see what all the fuss was about. Charlie was in the hall, on the outside of the box, trying to correct his mistake. He clawed at the cardboard, wanting to make his way back to the other side. He kept falling over, shaking himself, then trying again. It was funny. Feeling sorry for him, Mom picked him up, gave him a kiss, and sat him next to his brothers and sisters. "You went the wrong way, Charlie," she said. That was the first time Charlie broke out of jail, but not the last. He would make it over the edge, and either Midnight or Mom would grab him by the scuff of the neck, then toss him back into the box. It happened again and again. The whole family had to help keep him where he belonged. After a while, everyone got tired of dealing with his shenanigans. We officially changed his name to Wrong Way Charlie and let him have free reign of the hallway. Even Midnight stopped caring. All the other kittens were content to stay in the box, but Charlie came and went as he pleased. He never went far, though. Sometimes he would sneak a peek into my bedroom or into the bathroom, but that was the extent of his exploration. It was easy to forget that he was only a few weeks old and too frightened to venture into any of the rooms. The box and hallway was the only world that he knew, the only place he felt safe. A few days later, I woke to the sound of Grandma's voice coming from the living room. She was talking to my sister about making her a new dress. "No one told me Grandma was coming over," I thought. Excited to see her, to see if she brought me a present, I jumped out of bed and ran down the hallway. I feel this soft crunch under my foot. What was that? I turned around to see what I had stepped on. Then I screamed. Wrong Way Charlie crawled toward me. The back half of him was crushed and twisted. Horrible sounds escaped from his small mouth. Meow. Meow. I continued to scream. Charlie was still trying to crawl toward me while making that resounding, awful sputter. His body trembled and his little head twitched incessantly. Mom came running down the hall, my sister right behind her. Blood was everywhere, a trail of gore soaking into the carpet. All I heard was screaming, 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 screaming. It echoed down the hallway and throughout the years. Midnight leaped out of the closet and ran toward me. Wide-eyed, she hissed and swatted, then lapped at the blood flowing from Charlie's gaping mouth. Grandma grabbed a hold of me, held me close. My sister pressed her face into Grandma's side so she wouldn't have to see. Mom and Charlie were still screaming, still making those appalling noises. I couldn't tell them apart. "It's still alive," Mom wailed. "It's still alive." Oh my God, what do I do? Though Grandma tried to protect me, I couldn't look away. Charlie was crying in agony. The look on his little face said, "Why is this happening to me? What have I done? Make it stop. Please. Please, make it stop. You have to kill it," Grandma shouted, angry. "Put the thing out of its misery for Christ's sake." Mom ran into the living room and turned the corner. I heard a drawer in the kitchen pulled open, then slammed shut. She came running back, hammer in hand. E-E-E-E-E-E-E-A-E-H. Mom shrieked. She pounded the hammer down on Charlie's head, over and over and over again, while Midnight attacked her, trying to protect the kitten. And yet, Charlie still crawled toward me, gurgling. Me-I hug. Midnight kept scratching and hissing. Mom kicked her away and brought the hammer down again. After the 5th or 6th drop, Charlie finally stopped making the awful noises. Chunks of his skull and brain littered the hallway. It was hours later before I calmed down enough to understand what had happened. Mom told me that it was okay. Dad said it wasn't my fault. They said these things as they cleaned up the mess that used to be Charlie. But it wasn't okay, and it was my fault. My kitten got hurt because of me. If I hadn't been running, my Charlie would be alive. I killed him. Charlie was my first best friend, my first responsibility, and my first introduction to death. He'll always be with me. Even now, after all these years, every time I walk down a fucking hallway, I see wrong way Charlie's mangled little body crawling toward me.
Like all stories, I suppose I should start at the beginning. My name's Perry Keers. I'm 37 years old, work in education and usability. Weird combo, I know. And I like hard rock and big band jazz. I enjoy playing darts, cooperative games, and playing rounders. Oh, and I'm married. Though, I suppose I might as well not be. Sorry, I suppose that's not really the beginning at all. Let me try again. My wife, Alice, and I had been married for 5 years when the trouble started. Now, I don't believe in the supernatural per se, at least not rationally. Having studied psychology as part of my educational program, I do, however, believe in the power of the psyche to create incredibly elaborate traps for itself to get lost in. I suppose the closest thing I can come to think of the paranormal is how an otherwise seemingly healthy brain starts to put itself through impossible puzzles and challenges without having any real motivation for doing so. I want to make it perfectly clear right now that my wife had no history of mental illness, no abuse, no need to hide or compensate for things in her life, in her psyche. Hell, it took me almost a year before I ever even heard of Richter syndrome. Have you? I'm not surprised if you haven't. It seems it's incredibly rare and not considered an actual disease. The similarities between cases are too much like one another for it to be a coincidence, however. But once again, I suppose I'm not really starting from the beginning. Alice worked with children with learning disabilities aged 10 to 16. She was very patient and, quite honestly, put me to shame in her ability to explain things in easy to understand ways. She was, in my belief, also gorgeous, funny, intelligent, curious, and all in all, a very good person. I think I remember the first instance of the Richter syndrome rearing its ugly head. We'd been cuddling a bit on the couch on a Friday evening after dinner, watching some easy-to-digest movie or another. She got up, telling me she was going to send a couple of work emails before bed, kissed me, and walked upstairs. To my surprise, it took less than 5 minutes for her to come down again and sidle up against me. She seemed a bit perturbed by something, but I shrugged it off. Done already, hun? No, I think the computer's broken. There's something weird going on with the screen. A big line or tear or something straight across. I groaned in my mind. A broken monitor, while not a huge expense, is still annoying as hell, especially considering it wasn't that old. I didn't think any more of it until the next morning. I got up first, as I usually do, letting her sleep in. Figuring to get a head start, I went and turned on the stationery in our joint workroom to see if I could see what's wrong and how big an issue it was. Considering Alice got no work done, I figured it was big, but fiddle as I might, I couldn't find anything wrong with it. Chalking it up to a graphics glitch or similar, I made a mental note of cleaning the inside of the chassis and went to make breakfast. Apparently, the effects of Richter syndrome are compounded over time, so it starts out slow, then accelerates exponentially. The next incident, if you can even call it that, didn't happen until, 4 months later? We were once again on the couch, cuddling and watching a movie. She's got her arm up behind my back, absently playing with the hair on the back of my head. She often does this, and I love it, but this time, after fiddling around a bit, she would repeat the same motion. A downward stroke with 2 fingers, then a swipe, right-left, then left-right, as if covering up the downward stroke. Rinse and repeat. At first I didn't react to it, but after she'd been doing it for a good 10 or 15 minutes, I got curious. Hon, why are you combing the same spot over and over? What do you mean? She looked at me in askance, apparently not understanding the question. Well, you've been sort of combing over the same spot on the back of my head for about a quarter of an hour now. Do I have something in my hair? Oh, no. I think you have like a straight patch where you're losing a bit of hair. Straight patch? Yeah, like a line. Untangling myself from her, I felt around on the back of my head, but couldn't find any area where the hair was thinner. You sure? Yeah, she said, touching me on the back of the head again. A pause, a bit of fiddling, then, I can't feel it anymore. I must have imagined it. Yeah, I suppose. It struck me as weird, but hell, we're entitled to that, aren't we? Next time was a couple of months later, after which things started accelerating. I came home early one day to see her at the dinner table, dejectedly looking down into what looked like a barely touched lunch. At first, she didn't react when I called out to her, so I went up to her, gave her a hug and a kiss, and asked what was wrong. Oh, hey, Perry. Nothing, I went down to the bookstore to return that book I bought last week because it was damaged during printing or something, and the clerk told me I was just imagining things and that there was nothing wrong. I pointed it out to her, and she started telling me I was nuts and that this was my problem. I asked to talk to her manager about it, and she started calling me crazy and foul things and to get out of the store. It was just so sudden it completely killed my mood. The kids are out for a sports date today, so I went home early. I spoke gently to her as I hugged her again, nuzzling her wonderful curly chestnut hair. It's okay, hon. Try not to let it get to you. People like that are horrible, and they're just trying to drag you down with them. Tell you what, why don't we go to the movies tonight, eat out, and just forget about this, and I'll take it down to the store first thing Monday. She smiled then, that lovely warm smile, and kissed me. I think that was the last time I saw that smile as it should be. Come Monday, I went down to the store intending to, well, to be honest, I went there intending to start trouble. You don't yell at my wife and get away with it, not my gentle, loving Alice. Turns out, the clerk at the store and her manager had a different story to tell. They told me Alice had come in complaining that there was a crease or tear in the book that must have happened during printing and demanded a new book. The clerk, per procedure, checked the book before intending to dispose of it, but was confused when she couldn't find anything wrong with it. Asking my wife about it, Alice had told the clerk that it's right there, page 32 to 84. So naturally, I opened the book myself and, well, okay, I hadn't actually checked it before. But flipping through the pages, I couldn't find a single thing wrong with it. The clerk's manager continued the story, saying that when the clerk prompted Alice, my wife had gotten angry and raised her voice, causing the manager to come over. Alice had told them that they were swindlers and that the book was obviously defective and that they just wouldn't take responsibility. The argument had devolved from there, Alice insisting that the pages were somehow torn or marked and them denying it. Eventually, the manager had lost it and told Alice she was crazy and to leave the store. She seemed remorseful about it, and I wasn't too happy with it. But seeing as how there wasn't anything wrong with the book, I asked them if they would replace it for me, just to settle my wife's mind and mine, and the manager agreed. I think she just wanted to put it behind her. So did I. As it turns out, that was a futile hope. After this, I forget in which order things happened. All I can say is, things started getting worse. She threw away a store-bought salad when we were out walking, because someone had obviously dug around in it, looking for something in the middle. I came home one day to half the lawn being mowed, so deep there was almost no grass left. Alice said there was a furrow in the grass that looked horrible, so she cut until the grass was of equal length so it wouldn't look weird. I got an ominous feeling after that, compounded by several other small but significant events, always with the tears, furrows, lines, and rips. About 2 years after the first event, things started getting really bad. I came home to the house smelling of smoke and went upstairs to find Alice having ironed a shirt so hard she'd burned her way through it and into the ironing board beneath. She didn't seem to realize the damage she was doing and insisted she was just trying to iron out a stubborn crease. Later that same week, the police brought her home. The story they told me was that she'd been chucking books at the manager down at the bookstore, claiming they were all faulty and torn. The manager, recognizing my wife, had told the police she wouldn't press charges if I agreed to get her some help. What else could I do? but she resisted efforts to get better, claiming she was fine, that it was somehow just a big conspiracy against her, trying to cover up the imperfections and mistakes all over the world, people ruining things like our lawn to try and get to her. About a week after the book incident, I came to her, having wrecked her laptop, our stationary computer, and the SmartPad, claiming they had pixelated grooves in them. Another week with lots of small events, all with the same fixation, and I come home to the police ringing on the door again, this time without my wife. Turns out she'd tried ironing out a crease in the suit jacket belonging to a father of one of her students while he was wearing it with a baseball bat. Apparently, he hadn't gotten badly hurt, just some bruises, but she'd been taken into an emergency psych ward, raving about people's blindness to the tears and grooves everywhere. When I got there, they wouldn't let me see her, saying she was violent. I stayed outside all night, but come morning I forced myself to go home and get some rest. I don't think I slept for more than 2 or 3 hours, but when I woke up and called, they transferred her to a high-security psych ward for psychotic and violent behavior. I drove there and they let me see her for a short while. At first she was calm, expressing concern for the state of my clothes and hair and saying I should get some sleep. She quickly got herself worked up talking about everyday things, however, and soon she was screaming at me, accusing me of abandoning her and refusing to see what she sees. That I was just a cog in the great conspiracy against her and those like her. In the end, they had to sedate her and drag her away. That was the last time I saw her. She wouldn't let me see her anymore after that. But the last thing she said got me thinking, others like her. So I started doing research on the symptoms, and after about a week, I came across something called the Richter syndrome. Apparently, people suffering from Richter are somehow trapped in a mind maze wherein they start seeing flaws in things. It's not really flaws per se, as some people see everything as broken or imperfect. People suffering from the Richter syndrome keep seeing jagged or straight tears, often beginning in books, texts, or artwork with repeating patterns. As if hidden in the information of letters, there's a rip in what should be and what is. I can't exactly explain it since I've never suffered from it myself, but that's supposedly what it is. Richter gets progressively worse until the people suffering from it start seeing these things everywhere. Always in something though. It's not just overlaid over their entire environment. They fixate on small things. A supposed crease, a tear, a furrow, a groove, a shallow indentation, always in the form of an uneven-edged tear or line. Supposedly, it often happens to people with no history or predilection for mental health issues. And as I said before, it apparently starts small, then gets progressively worse over time until they become violent and paranoid. Apparently, from what little I've been able to gather, there's been no cases of people getting better. They've had to be hospitalized for the rest of their lives. I haven't seen my wife since then, more than 2 years ago now. I never divorced her, and I haven't dated since. My life moves on, but I just can't forget that fixated mania, the preoccupation with rips and information. It just seems too bizarre. The weirdest thing about Richter syndrome is that there's no mention of it existing prior to the digital age, which is why saying that the people suffering from it are hospitalized for the rest of their lives may be a bit premature. It also seems that almost all of the cases have never heard of others suffering from the disease or read about it, but they still tend to refer to themselves as one of many. That may just be the paranoid psychosis talking, but it just makes me wonder, what the hell causes a healthy mind to develop such a weird fixation? Could you really tell yourself if it happened to you? I guess this isn't really very paranormal or supernatural in any way. I just wanted to share my story about how a loving, caring woman turned into a paranoid psychotic for seemingly no reason. I mourn her, though she's still alive, and I wish I could help both her and others like her. But the mind is a devious thing, inventing ideas and seeing patterns where there are none. I wonder what a rip in text, not a page, text, would even look like.
The day I found my first hole was the day my best friend came back from the dead. We were in high school and stupid. Jake was his name, and we liked to go out to this old abandoned house in the woods after school to just screw around, do stupid teenage things. It was a pretty big place, to be honest. Two-story house with a basement, or 3 stories if you counted the small attic above it. The story is supposed to go that an old woman was building the house years and years ago in order to get away from the city life, but for some reason never finished it. Probably died. Anyway, the house was pretty close to completion when she stopped, but nobody bothered to finish it, and now it just sits there rotting away. So Jake and I would go to the house and just screw around, scaring each other or exploring the place. Whatever we felt like. Usually we were careful or lucky, but nothing ever happened to make us worry. Then the floorboards broke under Jake's feet when we were exploring the second floor and he fell. I never realized how bad the condition of the house must have been because when he hit the first floor, that broke too and he fell into the basement. I ran down and looked through the broken hole in the first floor. It was dark, but we usually had the foresight to bring flashlights, so I shined a light on him. I'll never forget what I saw. One of the boards, or something, must have fallen at just the right angle that when Jake hit the ground, it speared up right through his stomach. I could see him shift and try to grab at it, even hear him gurgle. And then he stopped. He was dead. I was sure of it. Our stupidity got him killed. I was in shock. I didn't know what to do. So I just ran. I ran out of the house and left him there. It was about evening when I got home and I went straight to my room. I didn't talk to anyone. Didn't stop for anything. I just wanted to curl up and try to forget that scene. My parents tried to talk to me, but I feigned sleep and they just went on. Later that night, we got a call from Jake's parents asking where he was. They actually woke me up for that one and I said I had no idea. The usual, well, if you see him, please let us know, came afterward, and I just nodded before I went back to sleep. The next day was school and I went through the morning ritual in a bit of a trance. I didn't want to go, but I couldn't stay home. I was pretty sure Jake's parents already suspected something of me. So I went. School was just like usual. People screwing around in the morning and talking. I went up to my normal group of friends that I hung out with before the first bell rang and my heart stopped. There was Jake. He stood there just laughing and being his normal self. When he saw me, he looked over and grinned before coming over. He made a joke, but I didn't hear it. I just continued to stare. "Hey, you okay?" he asked, starting to get concerned. Are you okay?" was all I could muster back. "Well, yeah. Why wouldn't I be?" He laughed a bit, but gave me a weird look. You don't know anything?" I tried to phrase it as delicately as possible. I didn't want anyone else knowing, but I figured that was enough to clue him in. If it did, he didn't show it. "Know anything of what?" he responded, and then the bell rang. He said bye and gave me a weird look before heading off to class. I just stared after in shock. Why was my friend here? I saw him die. At the very least, he should be in the hospital. But he was fine. I went to class, but I couldn't concentrate. I just kept thinking about Jake and how he should be dead. I kept trying to think of how he could have survived, but I just couldn't fill this strange hole of a mystery. After class, I decided I'd check out the house. Jake met me after school and asked if I still wanted to hang out. I told him I wasn't feeling well and we'd catch up tomorrow. He seemed to accept that and move off. It's not like I wasn't excited my friend was back, but looking at him made something in me cringe. He shouldn't be alive. He should not be here. I saw him. So I went to the house that afternoon alone. When I walked in, I could feel something. It was strange but familiar. It was the same feeling I got when I looked at Jake. That something wasn't right and it was just off. However, here it felt like a lingering feeling. Not this fresh what the hell I got when I saw my friend. I stepped forward and looked down. Sure enough, There was the damn hole he fell through. I let out a sigh of relief and bent over. So I wasn't crazy. I slipped out my usual flashlight and shone it down into the hole. Yes. There was the wreck I saw him land on. Just no Jake. Did he get free? Did he magically regenerate or something? I shone my flashlight up to look toward the hole in the second floor. It wasn't there. My breath caught in my throat and I began to frantically shine my light onto the ceiling. Where was it? I should be right above the damn hole in the floor, but nothing. I bolted up the stairs and, sure enough, there was nothing in the floor where he fell. Nothing. Something was wrong. Really wrong. I wandered back down to the first hole and peeked down into it. I'm sure that was the moment that solidified my fate. If I had just ignored it, moved on, and been plain happy that my friend was back, I might have been able to continue life as usual. But that moment, I saw something. Just a flash of something black, blacker than the darkness beyond my flashlight's range, shift and fly out of sight. I gasped and stumbled back, breathing heavily. I know I should have run, but my curiosity took hold, and my logical side said it was just some animal or trick of the light. So I swallowed my fear and I leaned over to peek again. I didn't see that flash of black again, but I did notice something. The boards and wreckage underneath the hole were gone. With that note, I knew something was wrong. Nobody can clean up something like that mess in the blink of an eye. I bolted. I ran out of that house and through the forest, swearing up and down that something was chasing me. I had a feeling that there was something out there, but now I know it was simply watching me. For now, I ran home and slammed the door shut behind me before I leapt into my bed. My body curled up and I just lay there trying to comprehend what was going on. It took me a while, but I finally drew myself out of bed. I had to figure out what was going on, but like hell, I was going back to that damn house. Not if some monster was in it. So I did what any teenager would do. I went to the internet and researched. It was slow and I didn't have a lot of luck at first. Looking up paranormal just got me weird pictures and stories. Friend comes back from dead got me a lot of zombie stuff. Missing time seemed to get me a little more info. A lot of it was around aliens, but a few stories seemed to pique my interest. Like something crazy seeming to happen, like a car crash or accident, and suddenly there's a time jump and things seem to be okay. Like nothing ever happened. There was one post on a missing time board that seemed to draw my attention, however. It was titled Plot Holes and was only posted a couple of days ago. I curiously clicked it. Everyone seemed to speculate what caused this whole missing time thing. A lot of the time it was aliens or dimensional, whatever. This guy, however, acted like he knew for a fact. And his reason was the most bizarre of them all. He started by telling a similar story. In a nutshell, his wife was killed in a household accident when part of their house caved in during a storm. While trying to get to her, he was knocked out by some other debris. When he came to, he was sitting in the living room and his wife was trying to wake him up. The house was fine with no sign of disaster and she was alive. He was ecstatic, but described a strange feeling, like he had figured out something he shouldn't have and that his wife shouldn't be there. Like my feeling I got with Jake. Over time, he couldn't be around her. It just was too strange. So he left. He went on the road, taking what money he had and doing weird little jobs here and there while staying in motels. While he went, he began to research. It took a great amount of time, but he found others with similar experiences. Most of them just described it as a miracle and moved on with their lives. Others couldn't shake the feeling like he did. All of them described the same sort of thing. Some event should have caused something to happen. A person to die or some landmark to be destroyed only to have it miraculously come back later. So what was going on? The author was at a standstill until he came across something. While researching people who shouldn't be alive, he came across a book review. Apparently, it was the latest book in the series, and in it, a side character saves the day by fighting off a bunch of enemies for the heroes. However, In the previous book, by a different author, that character had been killed. So this character couldn't have come back to save the day, but if he didn't, the main characters would die. The reviewer said it was one of the worst plot holes he'd ever seen. That got the forum author and me thinking. He said he'd post again after he experimented a bit, and I didn't blame him. I had a few things I wanted to experiment with as well. Nevertheless, I dropped him a message saying I read his post and that something similar happened to me, then called it a night early. I had to be extremely alert if I was going to try to look for the signs I wanted to find. The next morning, I woke up and started my first attempt at looking for plot holes. I know how crazy that sounded, but something seemed to click after reading that review. Someone should died, but that was ignored so he could do something of significance later. It sounded so familiar. The first few days, I didn't notice anything except for that weird feeling around Jake. Nobody else seemed to have it. The third day was when I noticed my first plot hole. It was minor. The most minor of details, but it was there. One of the girls in my class went from wearing a skirt to a set of jeans between periods. I know how that seems to make me look, but I'll admit it, the skirt was why I noticed. But to change into a pair of jeans within 7 minutes while walking across campus to another class? That doesn't make sense. I guessed it was possible, but it didn't make sense. It was like a costume got wrong during a scene change. After that, it went all downhill. I kept seeing changes everywhere. A sign would be black in the morning, but light green later at night, or a friend would go from wearing a sweater to a t-shirt when I looked away from a moment. You'd think that people would notice these changes, but nobody did. Maybe it was the strange feeling that I got of something being off after the accident with Jake, or perhaps you just had to be looking for them. But as I kept looking, they were everywhere. It was about a week and a half before I got a response back from the plot hole's author. He introduced himself as Dennis and apologized for being late to respond. His reason why? He had gotten caught up in observing plot holes. He was noticing the same thing I was. This is the first time I've ever actually spoken to this guy, but the changes he described matched mine to a T. Except for one thing. After noticing a misspelled sign above a store late at night, he turned away for a moment to look back and saw a shadowy black figure floating by it. It was hazy, like looking at the figure through a fog that just wasn't there, but after the being floated away, the spelling error was gone. A shiver went down my spine. That seemed too close to whatever I might glimpsed at the house. I hadn't seen it full on yet, but then now I knew what I was looking for. I wish I hadn't. It wasn't long before I began to see them. You had to look at just the right moment, I found out. When it seemed like nobody was watching or paying attention to that little error you just noticed, then you could make it out. A shadowy haze of a being, seeming to be dressed in a long black robe with a hood, messing with it until it changed. I saw one fade my friend's t-shirt into a jacket/shirt set on a cold day in class. And I saw another change an entire stack of books at the library into a completely different set before they were picked up by a student. Nobody noticed them, just like the holes. It was like you had to be on that wavelength to notice. I'd been conversing with Dennis a bit online, and he agreed with that idea. It seemed that you had to notice one to start seeing the others. If you could brush it off, then your life would go on. But if you were the curious sort, then you were like the two of us. You just keep seeing them all the time. I was starting to go crazy. I couldn't say anything to anyone, and Jake kept bothering me about why we never hung out anymore. I just couldn't look at him. He wasn't natural, but I realized it wasn't him. It was those things that brought him back. Maybe he had some destiny or something, but I had no idea. Things took another turn when I was having a Skype conversation with Dennis. He asked if they noticed me yet. I told him no, and then he got quiet for a long time. After some bugging, he finally responded and told me one of his friends that was helping him look into this occurrence was gone. Nobody even seemed to remember his existence. When he went over to his friend's house, Dennis found it relatively neat, save for a few items strewn about. As he explored, the belongings that were out of place began to find themselves back in their positions. Dennis was sure that it was one of those creatures behind it, and he confirmed his suspicions when he saw one putting back a book that had been thrown on the floor, and then turn and look at him. The two stared for a long time, the creature gazing onto Dennis while he looked into a blank nothingness that was its face, the dark hood covering whatever might have lurked underneath. And then it left. It turned and seemed to float away right through one of the walls. That seemed to be the last thing out of place then. The house looked like nothing had ever happened in it. Then Dennis began to notice something else. There were no pictures or objects identifying an owner. Unless you were that much of a hermit, you had at least an old family picture of some parents or something. Or maybe some mail with your name on it. But nothing. It was like nobody had ever lived in this fully furnished home. At this point, I began to worry. Dennis's friend had gone missing and nobody knew of his existence. I started putting the pieces together then. If these creatures could bring someone back from the dead, they could easily get rid of someone, right? This meant I was in danger. After that, I stopped. I was out. I ignored Dennis's messages. I tried to ignore all the holes I constantly noticed. I did my best to ignore those shadow creatures when I caught them. I even tried to hang back out with Jake. But every time we hung together, it was like I was looking at the face of a lie. And looking at him just made me think of those creatures. I imagined one pulling him up from that debris, slipping that board through and out his body, knitting up his wounds like nothing happened. I did my best to look past it all. Dennis was hard to ignore, however. He just kept tracking me down. I'd block him from my email and messengers, but he'd start making new accounts to talk to send me more messages. And he seemed to be sending more and more as the days went on. Finally, one day, I received an email from a new account that clearly was Dennis. I was about to delete it and block him again, but the subject chilled me to the bone. THEYFTERMGETONSKYPEINEADHELP. I didn't know what to do. If Dennis was in trouble from these things, then I had to help. I couldn't just leave him. But after him, they might turn their sights on me. I had to help. I wasn't going to just leave him hanging, especially if he was in danger. I logged on to Skype, added his new account, and immediately got a video chat request. Dennis was in his apartment with the lights off and he looked terrified. "What's going on?" I asked as I leaned in. They'd been following me around. He spoke, his voice an exasperated whisper. More and more of them keep coming around. And not just to fill in the holes. They're watching me. Are you sure? In response, he lifts up his laptop and carried it out to what looked to be the kitchen. He set it down in front of a window and drew back the curtain. I couldn't make it out anything until he turned on the light. My heart stopped. I'd only seen one of them at a time, maybe even two if something was a particularly big change. But there were at least 3 or 4 behind that window, just staring in with those empty, hooded faces. He quickly flicked off the light and turned the laptop back toward him. "Do you see? I don't know what to do. I don't want to end up like Jerry. Tell me what to do." He was getting more and more anxious. I had no idea what to tell him. I didn't know what these things were. I didn't know what they wanted, or how to stop them. I opened my mouth but couldn't form the words that he needed to hear. And as I stammered to find out what to say, I saw them slip into the background behind him. Through a freaking wall? With a cabinet. "Dennis," I yelled, "behind you." He turned just as the first approached. God, there were a bunch slipping in now. 3, then 4, then 5. He never stood a chance. The first reached forward with an inky arm and shoved it straight through his chest. There wasn't any blood, or even a sound save for Dennis's terrified scream. He began to writhe, grasping at his chest as the creature held him thereby. I don't even know what. His spine? His heart? Hell, it could have been his very soul for all I know. Then the others were on top of him. They fell onto him like a dark dog pile, consuming him in their dark presences. I couldn't scream. I couldn't look away. I just watched as he faded from view as those creatures piled onto him. Then, slowly, ever so slowly, they backed away. Dennis was gone. I bit back tears as I saw the empty space he had been in. I knew what had happened. He was gone. Erased. Nobody would even remember him. He was a hole that had to be filled in and taken care of. Then their attention turned to the computer. To me. My eyes widened as realization hit me. I was another hole. I was an issue in their grand scheme. A thorn that had to be plucked. A part that drew attention to the inaccuracies of this world they were trying to design. And I had to be taken care of. I didn't even bother to turn off the computer. I just stood and turned only, to find myself face to face with a horde of them, in my own house, in my own room. My back went to my desk as one shadowy shade glided to me. Its arm rose, and I could almost make out the tendrils of its foggy black cloak and the individual digits of its dark fingers. I couldn't move. I was frozen. And then it struck. I didn't physically feel the hand shove into my chest, but I felt it somewhere deeper, like it was grabbing an intimate part of my being. I felt violated, exposed, and most of all, completely terrified. I screamed as it began to squeeze. It hurt. It hurt so fucking much. My vision blurred, but I could see the others move around me. They filled in a circle around my body, regardless if there was something in their way or not. They just glided through like those things weren't there. And then they fell upon me. Black hit me from every side. I screamed, but no sound came out. I could feel that hand wrenching back, pulling something so personal to me away. My body felt limp then. I started to feel nothing. It inched along my limbs, slowly turning feeling of cold, pain, terror into absolute nothing. I could only describe it as a feeling of being erased. There was feeling, strong feeling, and then nothing. It slowly inched along, riding up along my arms and legs until it consumed my whole being. The pain faded along with it, along with the sounds of the world and my vision before me.
Soon, nothing was before me but pure blackness.
I was gone. I knew it. I was dead. Or worse, I didn't exist any longer.
Stretched out before me was nothing but darkness.
I tried to call out into the void, to claw my way forward, but I couldn't move a limb. More like, though I didn't have a limb to move or a mouth to yell. I was just an essence, a leftover floating in an endless void of nothing. I'm still there, in pure nothingness. I can't move, or I don't think I have anything left to move. It's gone. Every part of me is gone. I wonder what happens now. I wonder what Jake's destiny was. I also began to wonder if this was death or something worse. A punishment for sticking my nose in places it shouldn't be. Is this death or pure erasure? I'm sure Dennis is feeling the same things I'm feeling. I can almost imagine him too, floating in the same void. Maybe one day we'll meet each other. It's a hope that I try to keep alive. It keeps me sane that I might, one day, not be alone here. That's the end of my story. I wish it was better. I wish I could say I fought back and saved myself. At least that I was on the run. But some plots don't have happy endings. However, I'm sure I've left you wondering one final thing. If I'm dead or erased, then how could I have written this? Well, my poor friend, you've just discovered your first plot hole. Be wary if you see any more.